So last session, was the first session after my winter break, and I have begun, by summarizing again what I see to be the core of our work together here as earthworms, And I have summarized it many times, but I don't think one can say it often enough because it goes so against the mainstream of the culture. And as far as I understand it, is that we humans need to urgently work on our capacity for perception so that it can sink in what is happening, under our watch on this planet. Because obviously it doesn't really sink in enough because there's so much time wasted in lots of other things, and there's so much harm done, not only to human beings, but also to the biosphere and all other species in these senseless wars, where they are blowing up fossil fuel deposits, or I don't know how one says, on purpose and creating so much harm. It's unbelievable. So, today I'd like to screen share with you a very simple diagram from one of the world's most cited multidisciplinary scientific journals, the PNAS. I'm quite sure Jennifer will know it. The Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And, I got a diagram from 2018 on the distribution of biomass on this planet. And it shows us, that we are total minority. We human beings are a total minority, and we make such a huge impact. So let me screen share that in because it's truly staggering. Can you see that, Andrea? Yeah. So the 0.01% on top of the food chain, that's us here. This small little dot, that's us. And here, this is animals, including humans. Not even 1%. Plants, 82%. So just taking that in, we are 0.01%. So this, assumption of human supremacy that's really how it is. It's like a crazy way of thinking. And everything we have, and we eat, we breathe, we plants, our houses, our clothes, everything. Plants either, in the form of green plants or plants in the form of oil, which is also plants. So just, to get a little reality check, really. And, and all of this information, that's not Newman, that's from 2018, and I'm sure there were statistics earlier. So nothing is new about that. It's all over the papers and the screens, but there is no place in most of us modern humans for that information, for those facts to land in us, where it can really become integrated in our minds and in our bodies, because the brain is part of the body. In order, for those statistics to become real information, become part of who we are, become a cellular knowing, where you can make sense, where you have a felt opinion. You look at something and somebody asks you something, and then when you say what you think about it, you feel it in your body. This is, there's a connected way of knowing. And, most of us, don't have that capacity anymore because, information is flickering over the screen and go on to the next thing, and many of our children are conditioned that way. Even, I'm so glad to know there is now screen-free schools. I've seen on the way driving to somewhere, I saw I think it was a Waldorf school, and big screen-free classrooms. That's like a cool thing these days. You can get more money for that. It's amazing. Like when you go to Nepal or somewhere, there is we have computers in the classrooms. You need to pay more money. And here in the West, we don't have any screens in the classrooms. So it's just amazing, how it all has become really pretty intensely complex. But this is just how samsara is, of course, And I think, that's really what we are working on here on those Wednesday groups, to stop long enough, to have enough power of attention, what's called samadhi in the Pali language, or focusing of the mind, so that the mind can get still enough so that it can really connect with information. Because what we need to bring about is long-term plastic changes in the neocortex, which compromises about 77% of the human brain and interprets sensory information and manages decision making and planning. And those, firing lines, those habitual patterns in the neocortex, they have been hijacked, by our culture, of course. How could it be otherwise? So it's conditioned, and we can recondition it. And even, an adult brain can change until old age. There's no barrier. It just needs attention and interest. When you're a little kid, you can learn very quickly. And an older person, like all of us here, we need to bring attention and interest to it, but then it's still possible very, very quickly, really, surprisingly quickly. And I brought a quote for you by David Kidner from his book Nature and Psyche, and he says, "The story of modern consciousness tells of the gradual separation of an increasingly self-conscious individual from its surroundings. This is why changing our minds, or rather changing the very stuff of our brains, is so critical." And we do know that, the US is kind of the fortress of individualism, in particular the coast, in particular the West Coast, actually, And when Ayanana Bodhi and myself, when we came over here, in 2009 and started to teach at IMS and Spirit Rock, we really saw the difference, what the yogis expected, what the retreat center provides, Where we came from, it was kind of, I couldn't believe it, oh my God. It's kind of ridiculous. But it's just how it is, I have gotten used to it by now. And, that's what meditation can bring. It can help us to recondition those patterns in the neocortex. But meditation doesn't come alone, in the Buddhist teaching, but it comes inside of what's called the Noble Eightfold Path, together with 7 other factors, such as, ethics, right livelihood, right speech, right action, and right intention, right view, right effort. So it makes it a whole lifestyle, not just meditating on the cushion so we can deal better with the stress of our lives, but it's about changing our minds on that level of neocortex, like ongoingly, until, which is part of the Noble Eightfold Path of course, full liberation from ignorance, and we are all on the path, and even, we are not fully enlightened yet, it can bring a lot of benefits, as we are walking that path. And, and the main target is to consciously experience impermanence, the impermanent character of all phenomena. That's, is the main target of the Noble Eightfold Path. And, we'll say, oh, I know that everything is impermanent. Yes, we know it, in the brain, in the head. But to really know it in your whole being, that's something else. That requires a lot of capacity for steady attention paying. And my name, Santa Chitta, is actually means serene or stable or peaceful heart, to kind of train that, that's the name my teacher Ajahn Sumedho gave me, so that every time somebody calls me I remember, what I should be doing. So yes, a stable heart which can witness and can be with impermanence, as it presents itself. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a terrible thing. And to have the stability to stay open to both and come to the middle by reflecting on, what's called the 3 characteristics of life in the Buddhist teaching: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness or instability, and what's called not self in the Theravada teaching, or emptiness in the Mahayana teaching. That these are not separate things but processes. And, our bodies and minds are processes in deep interbeing with the planet, which is also a process. And the planet is in deep interbeing with the cosmos, made out of stardust. It's awesome. There's no stopping, there's no seeing anywhere to be seen or heard. And to have that really deeply sink into our being, that's what the practice is all about, on the supermundane level in terms of full enlightenment, but also on the mundane level in terms of how to conduct our lives on this planet. And, as I said many times, we can learn a lot from indigenous cultures here, who have preserved that cellular knowing of being part of a living, intelligent earth. So, without further ado, I think the best thing is to meditate, and really bring that into the personal experience, touching it with the body, as an organ of listening. And I thought, in order to set the stage, I'd like to share with you again an Icaro, which is like a healing medicine song, which is used, in particular in South America. And this is Manari Ushigua. And I have played this song several times ago, and I want to do it again. And for you to just relax and settle in and listen to the simplicity and to the light touch. He's a ceremonial leader, and I must admit I forgot which country in South America, but I will look it up. Maybe Andrea, you can look it up for us. Manari Ushigua. He has a website. Okay. Can you see that and hear it? Thank you.
Ionaka Baya Chaymi Visi Nawang Minyokan Chi Cao Say Ta Su Maka Paska Kambaya Chayawang Chayama Kihaw Nomon Doibin Sumata Kayama Chayama Okumoni
So, gonna look. I think Andre has checked it out for us. Manari Ushigua is a traditional healer and leader of the Sapara nation in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Thank you. And this is, and it's maybe hard for us to really recognize, this is also technology. This is just a very different kind of technology, a technology which helps to connect with the biosphere, as opposed to that kind of a technology is also about connecting. And they are both phenomenal technologies, and they need to be working together rather against each other. And this is also made, out of the biosphere. I mean, that's like different minerals and maybe oil, fossil fuels, and a lot of suffering, a lot of exploitation to get those into our hands. So this is, the big work, for us to do, to bring those two ways of looking together, because that's the only way how it can continue, this life of our species on the planet. And we are wreaking so much devastation through having been going down a certain path, and a lot of information we have lost, or maybe not lost, but rather forgotten. And there's now these efforts from different groups since the last 30-40 years, starting to recognize that and trying to find ways how we can bring that back, how we can bring that information back. And I think Buddhist meditation can definitely bring something really important here. So they're just sensing into the body and into the heart, how that feels hearing this. And it's the vastness of the issue is overwhelming if we think about it in terms of the old paradigm, where we people have to go and figure it all out, organize it. But also, there is another way of looking, which is more about the tuning and aligning with the intelligence of the biosphere herself, we call planet Earth. And basically, sensing into this, what I'd call an evolutionary update, which is coming through, which is mainly about opening to the fact, that human supremacy needs to end. Not just like white supremacy, but human supremacy. White male supremacy needs to end. And there's some really crazy things going on, like trying to pretend that is not what's asked of us. And this is just, getting worse and worse. Because an illness, or like something like, an illness sometimes needs to get really bad before it breaks, before the fever breaks. And not to lose our heart in that process. I think that's really important. That's why we need to meet together, because it's too hard to do it alone. And when we look at the images, from Iran, like the sky is black, and it rains down, black poison. It's all about fossil fuels. A lot about that. The addiction, like people addicted to heroin or something, they are doing anything to get the next shot. And just, making space for that in terms of, bringing up the compassion for that. This is just a situation. But that doesn't mean, that we can't cultivate our capacity for attunement to what's happening, on a level of the biosphere, that we are part of a living, intelligent Earth, and we always have been, and we don't need to anymore go down this old path. We can forge like new connections in the cortex, which allow us to again deeply connect with that truth in the same way, what we saw Manari Ushigua demonstrating, someone who is really part of the forest, and somebody who knows on a cellular level where the food comes from, where the water comes from, and has grown up in a culture where there is technologies to preserve that connection because it's considered necessary for living. That doesn't mean one can have a phone or a computer. Of course you can have that too. But you can't eat it. That's for sure. The most beautiful food on the screen, you can't eat it. And to take some time, to reflect in that way, that's what is required. And then, the responses will emerge out of that connection. We don't need to think them out. They are just coming through us. I've really noticed that, since the 21 or so, that I have really decided I would like to more engage in that way. A lot has happened, and I haven't really figured it out in my head. It was more like opening the door, making some space, and inviting in this new way of looking and the repercussions of it. And then it just happened, I can't really explain I cannot explain at all how it happened. But I don't have to, because what's important is that it did happen. And it is happening. So that's what I try to do together with you here. Instead of trying to figure it all out in our heads, we just first need to witness inside. Witness, with a WITH-ness, witness, by being with it. The turmoil also, the inner turmoil, and oh my God, this is also big, I really blah blah, all of that. That's part of it. That's like, oh sure, it is true. But this is only true as long as we look at it through the old paradigm, which is all about us controlling. But this is at the root of the problem, So it's much more about us, getting out of the way and making ourselves available as a immune system, I like to call it. The collective immune system, and it's like volunteering, to be that part of the medicine. And also needing to trust ourselves that we are in connection with life, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. We are an expression of life on planet Earth. We are part of it. This is just so. And when we sense into the gravity, it's very clear where we belong. Thinking about eating, drinking, breathing, it's very clear what we eat, drink, and breathe. We are just an extension of the planet, which can walk around. Trees can't walk, but we are like a walking tree or something like that, And our roots are not really visible because we eat through the mouth and we, all of that stuff. So it takes some adjustment, it gets some getting used to looking in a different way to really viscerally, cellularly know that deep interbeing. It's a multi-generational learning process for, educated Westerners. And we can just be the beginning of that. Why not? I mean, we are not at the very beginning, but it's still early days, It's a great thing to offer. To really offer ourselves to embody that change of looking. And they are happening, in the earth as a planet, and then they go through the whole system of the earth, all of the elements. And in our own bodies, we have earth element, water element, and so forth. And the earth element, water element, and so forth from the big body of the earth is in direct communication with our bodies, because we are eating it, we are drinking it. It's not just nourishment, on a physical level, but it's also intake of information, of course. That's why it's called information. It goes into our formation and becomes part of it, of us. And we can turn towards that information on this, on the level of aliveness, vibrancy, cellular presence, when we turn towards that deep sense of energetic vibration, which is very, very subtle. So that's why we need to refine our capacity for perceiving. And some people can also hear it, like what my second teacher, Ajahn Sumedho, called the sound of silence. It's a very high-pitched sound, but one can also feel it, viscerally. And some people can see it, the vibrancy. And that's, that's the information stream, which is wordless, of course. And that's why it needs some adjustment, to connect on that level. If we are so used to other levels, but we can make it happen. We can learn it. And through that, we can receive the guidance of the vast body of the earth, which is receiving information from the cosmos as well. It's pretty amazing. And I think it's also important, to keep that to yourself and not share it like with people who might just think you're a bit crazy what you're doing. So to be careful, with whom to share this, because it can be kind of confusing if one doesn't have a meditation practice. It doesn't make sense, Because, most people in the modern world put the head above everything else, the thinking mind, and this is about coming down into the body as a receiver, or as a receiver of information, which it already is, eating, drinking. I mean, it all goes into the body. But it's just not a way of looking we have cultivated a lot. That's why it's hard going, like learning to, let's say, if you've never been using skis and you go for the first time, I mean, that's amazing, I'm sure. It's like that, with this too. It's like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. But just keep going, and have a reasonable teacher who knows, and you're gonna learn it. It's even a more universal kind of a skill, I think, than skiing, because some people are good skiers, others are not so good skiers, and some never really good at it. But this, what we are talking about, everybody can learn. Everybody has that. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. So making that really a central activity of one's life, setting aside time and maybe creating a little spot where you live, a shrine, an image, a symbol you come back to every day. For me, at least, that's very important, And a prayer or a statement of intention. It's really helpful. Right intention is one of the 8 factors on the Noble Eightfold Path. It's incredibly important. And the essence of right intention is non-harming. So, to simply meditate inside the old worldview and trying to better cope with the stress is not really, at least is not Buddhist meditation, because it includes right livelihood, right action, right speech, right intention. It asks for more than just coping It's about reconsidering our ways of looking. I'll leave you to it for some time, a few minutes, like 7 minutes or so. So the earth speaks through us, through our bodies. And the deep ancient information in our psyche becomes alive in that way, slowly. It's a remembering. And it takes time, it's a training. Because all, the memory from the very beginning of life on this planet is all encoded in our DNA. If you look at a human fetus, the development stages, it goes through all stages of all, like all other animals. It's very interesting to look that up. In the beginning, the fetus is such, they can become anything. A fish, a dog, a seal, a human. Evolution, has spent a very, very long time to shape and evolve beings like us. Now we just got sidetracked. And if we continue to go down there, then we're going to basically go extinct, or we can come and up that, come out of that cul-de-sac. Totally possible. And wanders off, into thinking about something, just gently bringing it back to connecting with the body, the vibrancy, the aliveness, the breathing, the wind element. Which is such a proponent of impermanence. And the tuning to this intelligence of the living earth we are a part of. That is the Dhamma on a wordless level. The laws of nature. And I have on my homepage, the website, a beautiful quote by my first teacher, Ajahn Buddhadasa. And he says, "The entire cosmos is constantly teaching the Dharma. All we need is the mind which is ready to learn." The entire cosmos is constantly teaching the Dharma. All we need is the mind which is ready to learn. And I think we all got that. We all got that mind ready to learn. And we have the Buddhist teaching, to handle the mind, to work with the mind so that it becomes more and more ready to learn. That's also a technology coming to us from Iron Age India. A timeless teaching. Just like, the teaching of the indigenous wisdom lineages, as we saw from Manari. That's also a timeless teaching. Respecting more than human life. So as usual,